The best movies of 2020 so far. The cinematic world remains in flux thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has caused theaters to close and major releases to either delay their premieres or head straight to video on demand. So topsy-turvy are things right now that even the Oscars have agreed for the first time ever, and for this year only, to make VOD debuting films eligible for their annual awards. Yet amidst such chaos, stellar offerings continue to make their way to cinephiles, be it via Netflix, Amazon, and Hulu, pay-per-view venues, or high-profile cable outlets. With everyone locked inside, now is an ideal time to catch up on the stellar offerings that have already seen the light of day in 2020, the best of which are highlighted below. Number 10. Crip Camp. Historical changes often have humble beginnings, as was the case with the American Disabilities Act (ADA), whose origin is Camp Jend, a 1970s summer getaway for disabled men and women in New York's Catskill Mountains. James Lebrecht and Nicole Newnham's documentary is the story of that quietly revolutionary locale, where disrespected and marginalized handicapped kids were finally given an opportunity to simply be themselves, free from the judgment of those not like them. What it instilled in them was a sense of self-worth, as well as indignation at the lesser-than treatment they received from society. Led by the heroic Judy Heumann and many of her fellow Jend alums, a civil rights movement was born, resulting in the famous San Francisco sit-in to compel U.S. Secretary of Health, Education and Wellness Joseph Califano to sign Section 504 of 1973's Rehabilitation Act, and later, the ADA. Intermingling copious footage of Camp Jend and the movement it produced with heartfelt interviews with some of its tale's prime players, Crip Camp is a moving example of people fighting tooth and nail for the equality and respect they deserve and, in the process, transforming the world. Number 9. Rewind. Autobiographical tales of trauma don't come much more wrenching than Rewind, director Sasha Neulinger's non-fiction investigation into his painful childhood. A bright and playful kid, Neulinger soon transformed into a person his parents didn't recognize, a change, they soon learned, that was brought about by the constant sexual abuse he and his younger sister Becca was suffering at the hands of his cousin and two uncles, one of whom was a famed New York City temple cantor. Its formal structure intrinsically wedded to its shocking story, Neulinger's film reveals its monstrous particulars in a gradual, bits and pieces manner that echoes his own childhood process of articulating his experiences to others. Not just a portrait of Neulinger's internalized misery, it's also a case study of how sexual misconduct is a crime passed on from generation to generation, a fact borne out by further revelations about his father's upbringing alongside his assaultive brothers. Most of all, though, it's a saga about perseverance and bravery, two qualities that Neulinger then, and now exhibits in spades. Number 8. Vitalina Varela. The darkness is all-consuming, as is despair over a lost past and future, and a purgatorial present. In Vitalina Varela, Pedro Costa's aesthetically ravishing true tale of its protagonist, a Cape Verde resident who returns to Portugal mere days after her estranged husband's death. Vitalina wanders through this dilapidated and gloomy environment, which Costa shoots almost exclusively at night, the better to convey a sense of ghosts navigating a dreamscape of sorrow, suffering and disconnection. Each of the director's images is more ravishing than the next, and their beauty, along with an enveloping soundscape of squeaking beds, sheets blowing in the wind, and rain powering on crumbling roofs, is enchanting. Conveying its story through fractured plotting and dreamy monologues, the Portuguese master's latest is a series of tableaus of lovelorn grief concerning not only Vitalina but also an aged priest in spiritual crisis, and another young man poised to endure his own tragedy. The film's formal grandeur, its compositional precision, and painterly interplay of light and dark is overwhelming, as is the majestic presence of Vitalina herself. Number 7. never, rarely, sometimes, always. Putting a poignant face on a contentious social topic, never, rarely, sometimes, always tells the story of pregnant Pennsylvania 17-year-old Autumn Sidney Flanagan, who with her loyal cousin Skylar Talia Ryder by her side, travels to New York to procure an abortion. As envisioned by writer/director Eliza Hittman Beach Rats, Autumn's with child circumstance leads to a harrowing ordeal of uncomfortable doctor visits, financial anxieties, and incessant indignities suffered at the hands of men, be it sexually harassing classmates, her drunk and uncaring father Ryan Eggold, or a boy Theodore Pellerin. She and Skylar meet on the bus to Manhattan. Forced to navigate a chauvinistic world that treats them as disposable sexual playthings, denigrates them as whores when they attempt to fulfill that role, and then thwarts their desire for agency and independence at every turn, Autumn's saga is all the more heartbreaking for being so ordinary. Drenched in silence that conveys the loneliness of its heroine, and speaks volumes about the tacit understanding and compassion shared by women, it's a sobering study of perseverance in the face of individual and systemic oppression. Number 6. Bacurau. Vitrine Films. In the fictional northeast Brazilian town of Bacurau, residents are puzzled to discover that their home has disappeared from all GPS maps, and their cell service has ceased. Stranger still is the 1950s-style UFO zooming around the sky, perhaps the byproduct of the psychotropic drugs the townsfolk have ingested? Or is it a tool of other sinister forces preparing to strike? Teaming with his former production designer, Juliano Dornelles, director, Kleber Mendonça, Philo Neighboring Sounds, Aquarius delivers an allegory of zonked-out weirdness with Bacurau, which quickly has locals engaging in a do-or-die battle with a pair of interloping Sao Paulo bikers, and a group of murderous Western tourists led by a hilariously peculiar Udo Kier who've traveled to South America to partake in a variation of the most dangerous game. Stylistically indebted to both the westerns of Sergio Leone and the thrillers of John Carpenter, and yet imbued with an out-there spirit all its own, Philo and Dornelles' film takes a gunzo scalpel to geopolitical dynamics. Number 5. Saint Maud. Hell hath no fury like a religious zealot scorned, as demonstrated by writer/director Rose Glass' feature debut. A young hospice nurse named Maud Morfied Clark comes to believe that her mission from God, with whom she speaks and feels inside her body, is to save the soul of her terminally ill new patient, famous dancer, Amanda Jennifer L. What begins as a noble attempt to share pious belief and provide comfort for the sick swiftly turns deranged, as Maud is possessed by a mania, impervious to reason, and enflamed by both the slights she receives from Amanda and others, and her own mortal failings. The sacred and the profane are knotted up inside this young woman, whom Clark embodies with a scary intensity that's matched by Glass' unsettling aesthetics, marked by topsy-turvy imagery and pulsating, crashing soundtrack strings. A horror show about the relationship between divineness and insanity, it's a nerve-rattling thriller that doubles as a sharp critique, culminating with an incendiary final edit that won't soon be forgotten. Number 4. Gretel and Hansel. Orion Pictures. Oz Perkins is a horror lyricist fixated on grief and female agency, and both factor heavily into his atmospheric reimagining of the classic fairy tale. In a countryside beset by an unknown plagued teenage Gretel, it's Sophia Lillis refuses to work as an old creepy man's housekeeper, and is thus thrown out by her mother, forced to take her young brother, Hansel Sam Leakey, on a journey through the dark woods to a convent she has no interest in joining. Beset by hunger, the two come upon the home of a witch, Alice Cridge, whose feasts are as mouth-watering as her magic lessons for Gretel are simultaneously empowering and unnerving. Perkins sticks relatively closely to his source material's narrative while nonetheless reshaping it into a story about feminine power and autonomy, and the potential cost of acquiring both. drenched in ageless, evil imagery full of triangular pagan symbols, pointy-howed silhouettes, and nocturnal mist, and boasting a trippiness that becomes hilariously literal at one point. Gretel and Hansel casts a spell that feels at once ancient and new. Number 3. The Assistant. Kitty Green's The Assistant is the first great Medu film, a scathing look at the mundane day-to-day ways in which gender-imbalanced abuse and unfairness are built into workplace systems. Though you won't hear Harvey Weinstein's name uttered once, his presence is palpable throughout this clinical story, about Jane Sterling, Julia Garner, whose position as the low woman on the totem pole at a film production company necessitates enduring mistreatment of both a subtle and overt sort. Whether being chastised by her boss who's only heard in hushed phone calls, or sharing quiet, pointed glances with her female colleagues, Jane is a victim of both exploitative men, and, just as severely, a corrupt institutional structure that perpetuates itself by fostering cutthroat ruthlessness and alienating silence. Epitomized by Jane's meeting with a cruelly calculating human resources rep Succession's Matthew Macfadyen, whose threats are all the more harrowing for being both implied and logical. It's a portrait of sexism's many insidious forms. Number 2. The Wild Goose Lake. Memento Films. As with his prior Black Coal, Thin Ice, Chinese director Diao Yinan's The Wild Goose Lake has a coiled intensity that amplifies its romantic fatalism. Diao's neo-noir follows a gangster named Zhu Zhenong Ji who, after killing a cop in a criminal enterprise gone awry, partners with a bathing beauty prostitute named Lu Ai Guai Lun Mai in order to reunite with his estranged wife Yang Xiujun Wan Qian, all so she might collect the reward on his head. Rife with betrayals, manhunts, and shootouts, the auteur's narrative is constantly taking sharp, unexpected turns, and the same is true of his breathtaking direction, which reveals unseen figures and twists via precise camera work and expressionistic flourishes that are married to a realistic depiction of rain-soaked Wuhan and its lawless lakeside communities. Hunted by police captain Liu Liaofan, Diao's protagonists are engaged in a deadly game that's played in silence because they all inherently know the rules, and their sense of purpose is echoed by the film itself, which orchestrates its underworld conflicts with bracing precision. Plus, it boasts 2020's most gruesomely inventive use of an umbrella. Number 1. First Cow. Few directors are as attentive to the rhythms of nature, human and otherwise, as Kelly Reichardt, and the filmmaker's formidable skill at evoking a sense of place, thought, emotion and motivation is on breathtaking display in First Cow. Adapted from Jonathan Raymond's novel, The Half-Life, Reichardt's slow burn drama focuses on a nomadic 1820s chef named Cookie, John Magaro, who, after arriving at a Pacific Northwest fort, befriends and goes into business with on-the-run Chinese loner King Lu Orion Lee, baking and selling popular oily cakes made with milk stolen from a dairy cow owned by wealthy chief factor Toby Jones. Cookie and King Lu's attempt to rise above their socio-economic station through a criminal scheme, and the potential disaster that awaits them, is the suspenseful heart of this tranquil quasi-thriller, which awash in redolent faces, gestures and customs imparts an understated impression of the forces propelling its characters, and the pioneering nation, forward. Framing characters amidst forest greenery or through constricting cabin windows, and setting its action to the serene sounds of its rural environment, snapping twigs, chirping birds, running water, human breath. It's an empathetic vision of profound, male friendship and perilous capitalist enterprise. Thanks for watching and we hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, for we will be dropping a lot of tops videos to keep you updated about the latest and top trendings. Don't forget to hit the notification bell, like and comment, and also send us a review about our videos. Thank you and have a wonderful day.